McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 4, Episode 10. The Other Noble. October 20th, 1921. Continued. I jumped up from the bench in absolute terror. I rushed up to the sign and looked at it again. It pointed left. It said, "This way, to find the bodies." Ugh, I shuddered all over again. Was Ariana somehow setting these up? I'd followed one sign only to find her half an hour later. I'd come here looking for her, and found another sign. No, that didn't make any sense. Ariana wouldn't do something like this. This was too vague for her. Honestly, it felt very circusy and strange. Like I was dealing with an insane old witch from a storybook. Or a tiny elf who cackled and then disappeared. What was this? Who was leaving these signs? The bodies. The bodies. This sign was so peculiar, too. Now that we were in the human world, I was a little less afraid of touching it, and I reached out and picked it up. It was a real wooden sign. It smelled like pecans. The wood was dappled, like it had been carved the old-fashioned way, and it was stained with a dark, reddish, brown polish. It was quite real, tangible. It wasn't hazy. It didn't stink of magic. I felt like someone had dragged it out of their cellar, or their attic, like a family heirloom. I finally stood up, still holding the sign, and that was when Noble reached me. "What is—" He stopped in his tracks. "No. It was just leaning against this tree," I said. "Pointing left?" he said. "Yes. Let's go." Once again, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to find the bodies, but Noble was right. Step 1, investigate the sign, had been performed admirably by me. Step 2, find the bodies, or see what on earth this blasted sign was referring to, was now in motion. Noble scurried left as fast as he could. I sort of wanted to drop the sign, the way I might drop a disembodied hand, but I also didn't want to let go of it. What if it could turn into a clue later on? Besides, I realized it was also very clunky, and I didn't hate the idea of having a weapon in hand. So I clutched the grubby little thing and hurried after Noble. We walked to the end of the park. It was starting to get dark. Twilight hung grey in the air. The shops along the street were shutting down for the night, locking their doors or shutting their awnings. I thought about the sign. "This way, to find the bodies." "Do you think we're about to run into a huge collection of clockwork whiskelets?" I said. Noble shook his head and stood at the edge of the street, indecisive. "Maud, I think I've been an ass. I don't think the clockwork whiskelets were the bodies. This sign led us to them, but what if we missed the point? What if there was something else in that room and we missed it? What if the bodies are something else?" "And they're also here in 1921, you mean?" I said. "Precisely," Noble said. "Let me see that sign for a second." I handed the sign to Noble, and when I did, I yelped. My hands were covered in a blue glow, like someone had painted me with glow-in-the-dark paint. "Oh my God," I said. I stared at the glow. "What is it?" Noble pressed the sign to his nose and sniffed. "Is it blood? It can't be magic unusual blood. The sign itself isn't glowing. If it was painted in magic unusual blood, the whole thing would glow." "See if it comes off on your hands," I said. Noble checked his left hand. Nothing. He rubbed the top of the sign. His finger came off clean. "Maybe it takes a minute," he said, doubtfully, and we walked left across the street. I didn't see any bodies anywhere nearby. We stopped as soon as we hit an alley. Noble checked his hands again. Still nothing. I stared down at my hands, at the blue and the shimmer. "It looks like blood," I said. "I think I've only had magic unusual blood on my hands once, and as a matter of fact, I believe it was your blood, from under the bridge. But it's got such a color, such a glow. I mean, look at it. Look at the way you can still see the wrinkles in my hands, the veins. But it's like gazing into the moon. I've never seen anything, other than magic unusual blood, that's like this. Besides, doesn't it smell like blood? I sniffed. It was metallic, sour. The sign just smells like wood, Noble said. Not the sign, my hands. Noble smelled them, then wrinkled his nose. But how can it be blood, if it shows up on your hands, but not on mine? I wish I knew. What if it's... Noble picked up my hand and held it. He stared at it, like it was something from the bottom of the sea. What if it's some kind of omen? What if the sign is trying to tell you that you have the blood of magic unusuals on your hands, or that you will? What a horrible thought, I said. Not necessarily, Noble said. Not if these signs keep showing up to help us prevent it. Maybe it's a warning. Find the bodies. No, it's not, I said. It's not a warning. It's a horrible trick. It's like the train car. It reeks of the train car. It's a wooden mockery. Noble, what if everyone is about to die? What if Ariana makes the deal? What if this is somehow their blood and it's all on my hands already? Noble stared at me. I'm not dreaming, am I? I said. Just then, we heard a crack. Both of us turned towards the sound, and Renfield, the night enthusiast, stood there, in his pinstripe suit and a lime green tie. Ha! He cried. He stared at me, his eyes gleeful. It does work. Noble and I stared at Renfield. I wondered if we should try to teleport, or stay where we were. After all, if we could tease Ariana's whereabouts out of Renfield, it would be more than worth it to try to stay and speak with him. I stared at Renfield, and he stared at me. He was holding a funny kind of gun. It was copper and full of baubles and tubes, and it whistled like a tea kettle at one end. Do you know what it reminded me of, Diary? It reminded me of the huge machine that the night enthusiasts had, the one with the bright green tank of water. They'd made me drink that green liquid to get transported to the bottom of the sea so that I could kill part of my soul. I hadn't, of course, but the gun reminded me of that contraption. As a matter of fact, there was a green tank of water on one end of the gun. Small, but there. Renfield, I said, fancy meeting you here. I wouldn't get cheeky if I were you, Renfield said. Why not? Melinda Maud Merkel, Renfield said. Raster has some of your blood. Blood. He had my blood. I hadn't done enough. That afternoon when I'd spilled my blood next to Raster's door, I'd left my blood outside the door of the man who could track me anywhere. What stupidity! My stomach crashed into the cobblestones. All this talk of glowing blood made me realize what I should have realized before. Some of the blood must have splashed. Some of it must have failed to get cleaned up. And then, in the dark, it wasn't just the blood of some random charity woman. It was magic unusual blood because it glowed in the dark. No matter whose it was, at that point, it was worth tracking. Though sometimes my own stupidity impresses me. I'm so bad, I'm a marvel. Then again, I have only been a magic unusual since September. It's Maudie, Merkel, I said. What? You said Maud, I said. It's Maudie. I enjoyed seeing Renfield splutter. Sometimes it's nice to be pedantic in the face of evil. What's that you've got there, Renfield? Noble said. This? Renfield said. He gestured with a gun. It's a protection device. It means that you can't cast any spells on me while I'm holding it. Really? Noble said. You don't believe me? Renfield said. Here, take a look. He thrust the gun towards Noble. Noble was cautious and swerved as Renfield passed the gun, but the muzzle was pointed away from him. Noble took the gun and narrowed his eyes at it. Impressive. Adora, Renfield whispered, with a dark gleam in his eyes. In response to the muttered spell, the gun swerved in Noble's hands, spinning out of his grip. The gun pointed straight at Noble's chest as it fell, and it fired. Magic had released the trigger. A heavy green bullet, glowing like the tank of liquid, embedded in Noble's chest. It didn't go in far. I could tell that it had stayed near the surface of his skin because it glowed on the outside of his chest, through his shirt, like a demon grub that had burrowed into his skin. "What did you—" Noble murmured. He staggered back. He touched his chest. Then, just like that, his expression changed. I knew that expression. "Noble," I said, "are you all right?" Noble turned and looked at me, cold. "Never better." The green light faded in his chest. There was no blood around the wound. Whatever that bullet had been, it wasn't anything ordinary. "All right, then, Noble James," Renfield said. "Like I said," Noble said, "never better. It is a relief, isn't it?" "Why do you think we do it?" Renfield said. I took 2 steps back. It would be my turn next for the gun. No doubt Renfield had already cast a skull spell on me, ready for my next teleport. I had to be very careful, but I didn't want to leave yet. I knew the expression in Noble's eyes because I had met it before. I had been it before. When we'd gone to Germany to have bits of our souls removed, to pass as night enthusiasts. We had killed our empathy, for lack of a better word, for 24 hours. We had gone cold and hollow and careless. We'd become bleached of our humanity. I knew that look because Noble had just become a night enthusiast. And something told me that this time, it wasn't temporary. "He didn't agree to this!" I screamed at Renfield. I started crying, hot tears rolling down my face. All my emotions were a blur. I wanted to run. I wanted to tug the bullet back out of Noble's chest. I wanted to smash Renfield's face in. Amidst the shock and hysteria and misery, 2 thoughts were very clear. 1, I need to get out of here. 2, Noble James is gone forever. I tried to tell myself that there was a way to get the soul back, once it had been removed, once chunks of it had been hacked off with a butcher knife, once someone wasn't whole anymore. But that was a fantasy, a dream I had had once, to bring Ariana back to me, a way to somehow make Ariana a good person again. So far I had discovered nothing to indicate that souls ever came back. Ariana had been right when she told me to forget it. The souls weren't asleep. They weren't patiently waiting in the wings. The bits of soul were dead. No human, not even magic unusuals, has the power of resurrection. And I had just watched it happen to Noble. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, I wanted to tell him that he hadn't kissed me yet and that it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to have the friend I loved so much be dead and still be walking around in front of me. "Noble," I said. He shook his head. "It's done, Maud. And honestly, you know I care about you, Maud. I really do. That hasn't changed. It's not like I want to hurt you or harm you. My personality hasn't changed. Oh, you know how it goes. You've been here. It's better this way. It's so much better. Honestly, you deserve to feel this too. This freedom. This absence of caring." "You didn't consent to this," I said. "No," Noble said. "But neither will you." So far, Renfield and Nobles had both been letting me talk. Now Noble finally moved for the gun, which still lay on the ground. I tried to teleport, but of course Renfield was looking at me. Damn! I tried again, hoping for a blink. This time Noble was looking at me, too, pointing the gun. As if to mock me, Renfield put his hand over his eyes, signaling that he couldn't see me. I tried to teleport a third time, with only Noble staring at me, but of course I couldn't. Noble was now a night enthusiast. And I couldn't teleport in front of a night enthusiast. Cursing, I started to run, just as Noble pulled the trigger. I heard the bullet behind me, whistling like a bee. I turned a corner, and I still heard the bullet. It should have sailed off into the bushes and died there, but it could trace me, following me like an insect. I didn't stop running. I knew it would hit me within seconds, but Noble hadn't rounded the corner yet. So I teleported. On instinct, I went to the first place my heart thought of. McGillicuddy and Murder's pawn shop. It was dark. Of course, this wasn't a safe place. The night enthusiasts owned the secret basement now. No doubt they also had guards posted here and there about the pawn shop. To make matters worse, I'm sure Renfield had cast a skull spell on me and now knew exactly where I was. I needed to head to 6 or 7 different locations, one after the other, to be sure I'd lost him. Then again, what was the point? Raster had my blood. They could find me anywhere. "Oh, you lovely place," I whispered, staring up at the ceiling of McGillicuddy and Murder's pawn shop. What am I going to do? That's when I realized it, diary. Raster couldn't trace me anywhere. Damn it. I was tired of blood mushrooms and caves that smelled like whiskelets. Shaking my head, I teleported out of the pawn shop, sorry to leave its peace and its musty wooden smell, and that sense that I could hide, curled up forever, and listen to thunderstorms. I teleported thrice more, then finally ended inside a closed general store. I left heaps of money on the counter and took as many food items as I could fit into a bag. With the bag crunkling in my arms, I sighed and teleported one more time to a remote forest. I drew an eye symbol that only I could use, and I stepped through it into the whiskelet world. My heart nearly broke when I got there. The smell, the arch of the cave ceiling, the emptiness. I felt engulfed. This was, of course, the only thing to do for now. I couldn't devise a plan if Raster or Renfield or another night enthusiast was constantly popping up behind me with a gun. And speaking of guns, I was wrecked with worry. The night enthusiasts had a gun that could turn someone instantly against their will into a night enthusiast. I sat down on a front step then, diary, and I bawled into my hands. Noble was gone. Noble was a night enthusiast. I cried for him, I cried for me, and I cried with worry about what to do next. Someone had to warn the other magic unusuals that this gun existed. The magic unusuals had to get back to the haunted house and stay there. But if I went to warn them, all I would do was tell Raster where to go next. He could trace my blood. If I went to the haunted house, it would be lost forever, because the location would be revealed. If I went to the ruined castle, to the eye symbols that I'd left, to warn the magic unusuals on their way back, then I would send the night enthusiasts straight to them. The night enthusiasts could mow them down, one after another, sending bullets that traced them across the Irish moors. We would lose 20 at least. I had to warn them. But how could I warn them? I couldn't. I was helpless. The best thing I could do was hide here in this godforsaken world and make marmalade sandwiches and hope I didn't die. My best plan was to do nothing. Because nothing was what Maud did best. Suddenly, I spoke aloud. No. I snarled it. As a matter of fact, I snarled it down at my groceries. I glared at them, as if they had implied I would hide in this place, and nibble, and fret. I scooped the grocery bag back into my arms. I wasn't out of options. I was going to overturn every stone. Who did I think I was? Was I that bad at dodging, teleporting? I was a wizard at teleporting. Perhaps I could come here to eat and sleep. Every waking minute, however, I was going to teleport across 1921. I was going to leave graffiti everywhere. I was going to find every magic unusual I could. And if I found Ariana, so much the better. We hope you've enjoyed Season 4, Episode 10, The Other Noble, of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren, all rights reserved. Please subscribe, share it with your friends, and visit minervasweeneywren.com for more. The most impactful way to support McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is to simply follow Minerva Sweeney Wren at Meg Macaulay Inc. on Instagram and Twitter. Please consider giving $1 a month at patreon.com/SweeneyWren to unlock upcoming adventures. All links are in the description of this episode. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop will continue in 2 weeks with Season 4, Episode 11. They only arrive in the dark.